certainly I'm like a creative product leader. I would say all that experience, both like scaling up product organization, scaling up processes, being more responsible for business metrics and outcomes, and kind of driving the strategy. All that experience has really packaged up into being a much better design executive and leader.
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Today, we have a good buddy of mine, Jacob Zuckerman. He is the VP of Design at Propel that is focused on helping low-income Americans. Jacob's also been in the industry for about 20 years across design, product, worked at like different startups, Google, Yahoo, Nokia, and an interesting journey from print to design to PM back to design, which we'll get into during today's episode. So Jacob, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Rico. It's awesome to be spending more time together. And yeah, excited to get into it.
So let's do it. The first question always on the podcast is tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your creative journey. Where did it all begin?
Yeah. I started in like a very traditional space, getting a degree in graphic design, starting in print and marketing, creative, brand. I luckily, I just like graduated college, San Luis Obispo, Central California, and moved up to San Francisco. Like zero money, didn't even have a car, found a place to live. Kind of actually bunked beds with my current wife, back then girlfriend, and started applying for places. And very luckily, somehow got a job at Frog Design, an agency in San Francisco, part-time, barely paid, but kind of took a risk saying, hey, it's going to work out. And that kind of started my whole journey, starting originally in print design and taking over the Frogs brand and publishing an award-winning magazine, which was kind of our thought leadership platform across design, business, and technology. But doing all that work and being in San Francisco, kind of the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and working on content that was around technology kind of propelled me into like, oh, wow, there's a much bigger world of design and business and all these other things. And there's a lot of cool challenges and things. And also I thought there's like an incredible larger career to be had in that space beyond your kind of traditional print design. And that kind of led me into saying, well, what's the world of product design? And somehow, I don't remember exactly what were the steps, but I became a product designer, specifically kind of leaving Frog and joining Nokia and kind of getting a lot of opportunities to dabble more in digital design there, and then kind of growing on. And Nokia took me to Yahoo. Yahoo took me to Google. Spent 5 years at Google, really starting to lead new product initiatives, working on both billion-dollar products like the Play Store and billion user products like the Play Store, YouTube, but then also starting some of our own product incubator inside YouTube and kind of building startups inside like large companies. And that whole world of doing more and more entrepreneurial work that both had me kind of be at times a PM and a designer led me to spending time at startups. And that's what I've been doing for the past almost 8 years now, which is kind of crazy. And then I'm on my fourth role at a startup, at a venture-backed company.
Yeah. Oh, I want to get into like that because in a bit later on, like the startup lifestyle, right? Because some people, you're either made for it or you're not. But I want to go back. So you got a degree in graphic design. What was the dream going into college, or like what was the thing that made you decide that you wanted to be in design?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think one important context is I grew up in a family surrounded by artists, design, architects. Both my parents have a degree in architecture, and grandparents are all either furniture designers or artists and so on. So I actually stayed away from the field until like it was almost time to apply for college. And a few months before, I'm like, oh, fuck, I think I might want to do this, while completely ignoring it. But I got really lucky. My track coach, Tanya Fisher, in high school, they kind of sensed that I had, both they knew my kind of family background and this curiosity, and that curiosity started to increase my junior year in high school. And they hooked me up with an amazing kind of internship and summer job at a graphic design studio at a PhD, which like was a small shop, but did amazing work for Nike and Chronicle Books. And so I got, as like in high school, I was doing kind of like an internship that someone would do in college, and I got exposed to all this amazing work, and that exposure kind of, oh yeah, this is really what I want to do. Ultimately, I think what I discovered is I just like to work on things and figure things out and apply kind of creative thinking to problems and solutions, and kind of getting to being able to kind of work through all the problems or deduct to get to that final little thing that you feel like, oh my God, this is it. This works well. This feels great. This makes someone feel something. So going through that process, I will say I'm not a great student. I did not enjoy going to school per se. Enjoy the social aspects of school. I love working and I love like designing.
Yeah, I'm the same. I was a terrible student. I was a good high school student because you could get by, high school kind of just on smarts and just like, figuring things out. But I was a terrible college student. But so you almost hit on what I was going to ask next is, so what is your mission with what you do? Like what is your personal mission? What are you set out to do when you go to work and with the roles that you take?
Yeah, well, that's changed a lot over the course of 20 years, because I feel like when I spent about half of my career as a IC, maybe even a little bit longer. So to be honest, there's a lot of individualism in that, doing things for my own sake or trying to prove myself or do better than someone else. And I think it's fine. It's like, I think it's like that competitive nature drove me to like work really hard and try to like get to the best possible solution. For the past 80 years has been a lot more focused, and what drive is like, hey, how can I make a company better? How can I make a team better? How can I improve culture? How can I get a group of people to produce better outcomes? Ultimately, that all of that leads to like, helping more people or helping someone do something better. And if we can do that, it usually leads to better business outcomes and so on. So a lot of my drive is like, wow, putting in hard work and seeing how an organization or a group starts doing better or performs better. And seeing that kind of remotivates me. Oh shit, it's working. let me see what we can do next to keep going on that trajectory.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like seeing like groups and teams build something new that didn't exist before, ship something, move the needle on something. I just as much I really enjoy seeing us designing something better or making our product experience suddenly more delightful than it was a year ago. I get the same kind of motivation, excitement, seeing kind of a business metric or needle move also at the same time. So being able to do things that are kind of making the business healthier or scale and grow is also personally exciting for me.
Yeah, you brought up. There's so many questions I have for you. You brought up a good debate that often is had in product and design communities is how do you balance metrics with delight? Because delight is one of the few things that it's, you talk to any product person, you're like, well, how do you measure delight? And there's some ways you can do it, and I'm going to throw one more wrinkle in there is how do you measure delight with core metrics and then craft?
Yeah, very. Yeah, what a topic. I like maybe would put it into a few different buckets of like craft's an interesting word because it's been top of mind a lot for the past year. And I kind of realized like, yes, you could apply craft to be really design centric as like a thing that design do, but I actually think like craft is like something that organizations as a whole might like adapt across, like craft in our business thinking, craft in our product management execution, craft in engineering, craft. So like I think that is like, hey, which organizations kind of think about craft as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
versus like, oh, the design team does craft stuff, we do this other stuff. And so like I think craft gets to this like both higher thinking, higher level of curiosity, more openness to change, and this ability to keep coming back to things to make them better and better. And some organizations have more of that and some less, and many try to work towards like increasing their ability to just do things better and improve on things. And I kind of think of craft that way. I don't know, man. Delight is like, I feel like I've been climbing this mountain for a long time. It's like, hey, can we just do things more delightful? Yeah, it's all often received very like, okay, what does that mean? Or like, what? How does that come back to our OKRs? And yeah, like I think ultimately, like I think. Let me see if I can find my words here. In an ideal world, there's like companies that just care more about those things and they just make it part of their fabric. I remember spending time with folks early on at places like Square, and they're like, "Yeah, we just like think that we should ship products that are just awesome or meet a certain level of like greatness." And I think there's other companies that just have that bar. They're not arguing for delight or not. They just say, "Hey, as a business organization, we want to create these kinds of things in the world," and that goes a long way. And I guess as a design leader in startups, they were often trying to figure this out still. I find different ways to kind of push on that, but push on like why should we care and when should we care? I try to push her through the resources that I have. Like, hey, let's up level our foundations and systems. Let's make sure that we're calling out the things that could be better, or at least in the design processes, so downstream things improve. And then finding opportunities to show that, hey, those things do matter and uplift, or like, hey, once we do it, like, oh my God, look how happy everyone is. Like, we recently just went through a redesign or restyle. Like, we launched a new brand at Propel last week. This week, shit, it was this week. It was on Tuesday. We just went through a huge launch, new brand. We took our consumer name and our kind of corporate name and merged it into one. But we also restyled the app. And what's really awesome is when you have those opportunities. In this case, we had really strong alignment between the like our CEO and our like EPD leadership and leadership as a whole to go make those visual and delightful investments. But both backed the company. Everyone was so stoked. Everyone was like, oh my God, the app's looking so much better. So there's also this proudness. Like when you're able to show that, hey, we're building something that looks nicer, something that feels better, something that's faster, something that works better, there's a certain level of pride that comes back. And I think there's a little bit of it, like, it could be a little bit infectious too, once you're able to start getting that. And there is a little bit of momentum once you're able to kind of prove out that you could start building things a little bit nicer and better. That was a ramble to some degree. So I apologize, Rico. And I think that is a hard topic to cover well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it well, right? It has to be ingrained into the fabric of the business, right? You take like a Airbnb, for example, right? Airbnb is very design driven, so they take into consideration delight and some of those things. On the flip side of that, I can't think of any right now, but there are some organizations that are very, and I'm using product very generically because lots of times design, depending on you can be part of, but like the product management and maybe the engineering side of it where, and this is a broad stroke, engineers out there, I know a lot of you care about design and delight, but in broad strokes, right, they're very metric driven, right? So there's companies out there that are like, what do the metrics say? And design isn't necessarily considered in the fabric of what they do, right? So those, I think I agree with you, and it's hard if it's not that way. It's hard to create an environment like that. But the ways to do that could be through systems and like making sure that design consistently speaks to that within their design language and how they present their explorations, right? So if you make your explorations, all of them delightful, and those are your options, but they're also accommodating and accomplishing the goals of the product organization, and that's ways you can get in. But yeah, you're right. Like to test for delight is something that's like the I can't think of a thing right now, but like that's the thing most people can't do or won't, or a lot of organizations aren't willing to go after, like testing for delight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, to like clarify my own things, and we're both saying the same thing. Part of the fabric, it is very cultural. It takes time to scale up. I think even things like Airbnb, like it's not like they were like
It's
what
not
they are
perfect.
today. They weren't that 10 years,
Yeah.
they cared about it, but like I think like all organizations like do a little bit better uh, year over year. And I think the same thing for like our design organization today, Propel. Oh my God, the team's so amazing. We're already so much better than I feel like we were 6 months ago, and we were making all these investments in like foundations and systems. I know that over time, we just keep doing what we're doing, we're going to get to continue to build more and more delightful things. But it does take an investment from the group. Alone, a design organization can build a more delightful product.
Yeah.
It takes those extra couple hours from engineering. It takes scoping from product managers.
Hmm.
You need to have a little bit of like processes in place to say like, hey, how are we measuring what's good enough or what's great for us, and what's
Yeah.
missing when something's not great. So all those things need to account for to like as a whole to get there.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit to your origin story because we kind of glossed over high level, like the transitions you've had in your career. So I'd love to hear some stories and hear from you how you made those transitions and what were maybe some of the challenges. Because going from print, like people may think, oh, you're just designing. So going from print to product designer, like what's the big deal? If you're not in the industry, that you may think that, but there's a lot of things that you have to account for. Like in graphic design and print, you're not accounting for affordances and interactions and things like that. So for you, what were some of the challenges in transitioning from a relatively static design world going into product design and then navigating the product world?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that too deeply, other than just like maybe not being so great at it at first and just keep working at it and getting better. Um, I think what helped, like I always enjoyed like being a little more multidimensional and thinking about how things worked. And so in some degree, like some of that transition felt kind of natural. I just had to learn a lot more about what UX was and what user research was and how to like build for certain operating systems. One of the timely things on my end is that, to some degree, my transition from being more of a marketing brand kind of graphic designer into product design was the same time where suddenly more of those things started mattering in product design, where bringing a little bit more soul, visual interest, like emotion, suddenly like layouts and typography. So I was kind of entering into product design at a point in time where I felt, oh, I can push certain things in a different way, because I had to use this very traditional thing, like understood what good typography was, use color imagery, photography. So I can come into this and almost more of like building a beautiful book at times, or using some of those skill sets into like redesign, like building a personalized news product for Google, or redesigning the Play Store, where we're suddenly celebrating visuals and being more, bringing some of that emotional design into things. So I felt that's one of the things that worked well, having some of that background and DNA, then applying to product design when we're going through that big transition when I was specifically an IC.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I spoke to Adrian Pittman. I don't know if you work. He was at Google also, but we talked about a similar thing in his transition, and I think more. So he was a web. He started off as a graphic designer, and then was in web design before product UI was a thing or product design was a thing, and he kind of just naturally transitioned into it, right? And I think and listening to you about like your journey, it almost is like the theme that I have coming out of what he said and you said is like being evolving with the emergent technologies and the context of what's going on today. And it's similar to like I was experiencing when I was at Netflix too, because mobile wasn't that big a thing. It was all about 10-foot. But now you had the design organization having to shift into more mobile because we weren't just a US country, right? You go to places like Brazil, Korea, India, where are mobile first, we had to make that transition into like not only being web and TV designers, but now like experts in mobile design, which, it was a full transition and all that. But would you say that's what you kind of did? It just kind of evolved with the technology and the way things were going, which,
Yeah, I think
I
I just
mean,
like caught onto this like shifting tide train that was there and got really lucky. I got also lucky that surrounded by really great people. So folks that were a little bit ahead of me in their careers. A good friend of mine, Marco Page, who I worked with both at Nokia and then at Google for 5 years, and our families are really close. Like just folks that I could like partner with really deeply, and both like I had certain skill sets that didn't, but they also had skill sets that I really absorbed, and so just being surrounded by folks and being lucky to go into places, and just learn from others, and then learn through doing. I think just like
Yeah.
this, not being afraid to try new things or just dive in, and over time, if you do it a couple of times, you'll just yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just becomes part of like your DNA, right? It's just like constantly evolving. Um, I want to get into like the different size business because you started off small shops, startups, big companies, and now back to startups. So what has been the difference for you, and what is the draw? Because you've been at startups for the last 8 years. What is the draw with the startup world? Like, so what have you learned across all those different things?
Yeah. I think specifically like what like startups. Had no idea when I left Google that it'd be like 7 or 8 years later. So it's been like a journey in itself. Couple things. Like one, I think what I've really enjoyed is like, man, I've grown so much in so many different ways. So it's this like ability to have this like step function growth, and not just in your functional area, but just simply being in earlier stage businesses has given me a lot of opportunities to just do things I just wouldn't ever do at a larger company. Take on taking on big strategic initiatives, go and figure out pricing for something. Suddenly it's like, hey, we have a marketing problem, we have a people problem, and so this ability as a leader in startups, the ability to do things, so many other things that would be outside of like your traditional design role. So I think those things have been amazing, and I get a lot of personal curiosity and drive in being able to do new things I haven't done in the past. I think every year that's what I seek for. If I'm like doing stuff that it feels like, oh, I can do these things well, but I'm bored. I don't know. I think that's like not for my personality. So startups have enabled me to like continue to like have a lot of interesting adventures and tackle things that I'm like, I don't know what this is or how it's gonna go, but I'm like, it's exciting to go figure it out. And I think at this point in time, you kind of form enough leadership experience and frameworks or understanding how to like deal with ambiguity or new problems that you know you're going to be able to solve for it. But it's exciting to see being able to just go dive in and learn a new area and go do it. It's like part of the excitement. I think startups offer that in a unique way that maybe it's harder.
Hmm.
If you're like, I don't know, a senior manager or director in a large organization, you might have like a people scale, which is really also interesting, exciting, but maybe less diversity in problems.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So like that is great summation of like why people prefer startups, right? Because you get to do a lot of different things. And I was talking about this with somebody the other day, where it's startups usually, if you're a great generalist and you like getting your hands into a lot of things, like it's perfect, right? Because generalists, I mean, the startups typically you don't have lots of hands and you don't have lots. So like if you're a good generalist, you know all the foundational stuff, you know how to put all the pieces in place and know the processes. And then when you get to a certain size, when you're starting to scale and grow, then you start to bring in either more specialized generalist or specialists altogether. As opposed to like when you get to a large organization, it almost can feel like, and nothing against large organizations, but it's almost that way where you feel like the cog, right?
Yeah,
Because like you're a cog in this big machine who like just does this. Like it's not uncommon to find at a startup a designer and a researcher all in one,
yeah,
right? But you go to like a Google, you have a design team and then you have a research team, and
yeah,
those are pretty large teams on their own,
yeah.
right? So
Totally. I think maybe one funny thing is like us at Google towards like the tail end where like a handful of us left for new opportunities. We always ended up being like finding our own small teams or small teams that did big things or small teams that were like design plus engineering together in one. And so maybe I've always had this curiosity of being both, also taking on a wider range of responsibility, but also being close to the product and close to the metal. I still design. Got a bunch of files open somewhere here. I'm editing a video right now. So I still like really like to tinker and be hands-on and understand the problem up close. Maybe that will shift. Like still not that old. Still have time in my professional. So maybe at some point in time, like curiosity of like really large organizational scale will come back, and I can totally imagine that for myself. But at this point in time, I still like also being really close to the users, the problems, the design work, also.
Yeah, and so a little bit more. So you've done PM and design. Do you have a preference, or like how do you think about those two, and what how your career has
Yeah,
progressed?
I like being across both at times. I think the experiences. So, like for context, I've both been a head of design and a head of product. I've been a CPO. We're both kind of overlooking design and product management and engineering. Um, I think one of the things for me, well, a couple of things. One is like the triad and having a really great product partner and engineering partner and having a trio is really great, especially like you have the right like accountability and respect and transparency and directness. Like, so having like the trio is great because you can just have more perspective views. I think sometimes it gets harder if you're responsible for more roles. Like I appreciate the push and pull that like when you have the like multi-leader types of organizations. Um, kind of the and myself coming from a design background, when it comes to my style as a product leader, it might be quite different than someone who comes from like a purely business background and comes into a product. So certainly I'm like a creative product leader. Um, I would say all that experience, both like scaling up product organizations, scaling up processes, being more responsible for business metrics and outcomes, and kind of driving the strategy. All that experience has really packaged up into being a much better design executive and leader. It's hard for me to imagine being successful and being able to like have the right voice and the right opinion or get the right seat at the table without both curiosity, knowledge, and experience in that. And so I think playing sometimes more of a product role has helped accelerate those learnings and growth.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I think what I've learned, and it kind of maybe kind of has built empathy for other groups, is that I have found myself, interestingly enough, sometimes design weirdly taking a much further backseat than I realized. I'm like, sometimes you're like facing these set of business problems or other things, and like, wow, I'm spending 80% on something that's like, yes, there are some creative aspects to it, but man, I don't even know what the designers are up to right now. Like, there's this stuff. So it kind of builds a little bit of empathy where it's like, I think as design organizations, we tend to get a little more frustrated at times or complain or like try to like, hey, we're over here. But like, so also there's empathy. There's like, the world's complex. There's like, you have to understand what the other organizations care about and the other things that are like distracting other groups. Um, so anyways, that like building up that empathy and like priority between where design fits versus other problems or other things you need to fix for, kind of builds interesting perspectives.
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought up like the design role, right? Because there's I've been in multiple organizations where design is like PMs are usually the center of things, and not meaning that like they're the rock stars or anything like that, but usually like PRDs, roadmaps, things like that. But depending on the organization, there's design right next to the PM where it's like they're simpatico. And that those are ones those are the organizations usually I've found the most success in. And there's the ones where, to your point, design will take a backseat to the PM and kind of this is a very reductive way, and don't no one get offended by this, but they're almost like the hands and creator based on whatever the PM requirements are,
Yeah,
right? And just like kind of executing against a PM's ask.
yeah,
And those organizations, they not to say they don't do well, but those are the ones I find the most conflict because design's always like, well, we want to sit at the table and these things like that. So what from your experience, like what have you seen works well? Have you seen it might be contrary to what I just said, but how do you think about organizations? And when you're head of product, you had to balance this,
yeah.
right? Because design reported up in I'm assuming design reported into you
Totally,
too,
totally,
right? Yeah.
totally. Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think when I'm like in that earlier statement, I'm saying sometimes when I was across, I was realizing the thing that I'm coming from, which was design. Oh wow, I'm spending considerably less time on thinking about design and going through that. mainly because, wow, there is actually a lot of other responsibilities, especially. And so you start building more empathy, like, oh, here's all the other things as a product leader or PM you have to do. Ultimately, like the yes, I'm with you. The kind of organizations I want to work for, the kind of teams I found success, both as like a manager and IC, is like when the relationship's really tight and equal. Some of my best and ongoing friends were the PMs I kept arguing with in the room and like strongly disagreed with and kept like butting heads. It is those engineers that I just kept walking over to their desk to convince them to like, can we just fucking change this? Can we just make this better? But like, it's those, but it is that ability to both be empowered and be able to work really closely. I think those things take a little bit of time, but I think those are the things I would always try to foster for, and the folks that try to hire for also that have that experience of like not working waterfalls, being able to work in products, being able to also change the modes of working in their partnership with PMs and engineers. I think that in itself is an experience that some folks luckily have got in their careers and some folks haven't. There's like a true story recently. We've like been, working in different ways at where I'm at today. And like, we had a designer say, oh my God, like, I've been working with engineers so close this past quarter. I've like never gotten to work this way. It's so much more enjoyable than it's ever been in the past. And so it's interesting that like you kind of sometimes reflect and forget some folks have been in their careers for a long time, working in very particular ways and been kind of fortunate to be exposed to things. And then other folks, the world's a big place. There's a lot of companies that work in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. And some folks don't get that exposure until a certain point in time. Anyway, that's a good, like, interesting reflection for me earlier this year.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you talk about with empathy. So I had never held a like PM title, right? But I made it a point to, out of like this is when everyone was in office, and obviously it's harder with remote and hybrid. But I made it a point to 2 or 3 days a week sit with my engineering counterparts, right? And people would always wonder why, like executives when I was early in my career, well, how can you get so much done? Well, it's like, because I'm sitting with people, and so if they have a question, I'm there to answer. And if I have a question, like, what if this did this? Like, what, like I would ask an engineer, like, what if this just did this a little bit easier? Like, let's find out. 30 minutes later, try it.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. Oh my God.
And it's just like some people, I don't know if you've seen this, but some people are so resistant to that idea of like, sit with the people that you work with the most across the table, not within your team, and you'll likely get more things done.
Oh, spot on. I have so many examples of that. I feel like anytime we've had like a high moment in building a new feature or product, I viscerally remember this at YouTube when we were building a new live streaming experience. Like I had a second desk upstairs where the engineering team was, just like even if I had nothing to do that day with them, I just would sit there just to see, or just at least go sit there for the afternoon. We had like an engineering team one time in Cambridge for another product, fly there every couple of weeks just to be there. And yeah, everyone kind of just, when you're not like in your functional thing, but go out and spend time or be in the same environment with the folks that are building the product, goes a long way. I think as a leader and executive too, there's a big difference between sitting with your team, which at times makes sense depending on like what problems you're solving for, versus like being able to like sit with the other executives and be in a cross-functional environment. The conversation change, the relationship change. That's a whole nother thing about like the whole concept of like your functional team versus your executive or leadership team, your team A, team B, and all the dynamics in there too.
Yeah. There's a great book for that if anyone wants to read it. It's called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
If you've read that, it's a really great book, Patrick Lencioni. We won't get into it, but if you are digging what we're talking about, that's a great way to consume it in a book form. Okay, so want to get into some advice giving now, because you've seen a lot of things across your career. So now knowing, you're 20 plus years into your career, you went into graphic design because you were able to work at that shop in high school, or get exposed to that shop in high school. So what kind of advice would you give your younger self, or anyone out there who's either earlier in their career or thinking about pivoting or thinking about this career path?
Yeah. Well, maybe not, but my first couple of instincts about like younger self might not be about, maybe related to pivoting, but one is like spend more time exploring, doing other things, discovering, maybe a little more travel. I feel like in my early career, I worked a lot, and just totally fine. Like worked out well, but now with 2 kids and a growing family and like a different set of responsibilities, I'm like, man, there's a lot of other things in your, throughout your all your 20s, even early 30s. So like from one side, it's like chill a little bit and like take some time to like breathe, relax, explore, and try more new things. I think there's a whole world of exploring more things, more businesses, more different types of companies, different kinds of roles. I think curiosity early on might take you to some directions that you wouldn't expect. Maybe to some degree, I got some of that because I was like always willing to change. And weirdly enough, if you look at my LinkedIn, I've been to a lot of different places. I don't know if that's bad or good, but I'm always curious about like trying new environments. So just be curious and try new things. And yeah, take a few breaks and get a little bored and curious. Procrastination is also good.
Yeah, I love that. I love the it was the same advice I got was to get bored, right? And then you'll naturally get curious and you'll find the things that you start to gravitate towards. But if you just right away, if you just pile yourself up with work, it's hard to distinguish. Am I doing this because I enjoy doing it, or am I doing it because it's keeping me busy, right? And that idea of like when I left Netflix, that was the thing they said, like get bored, like be bored for a while, and then once you're bored, like what you really want to do will start to bubble up. So I
Yeah.
love that advice. And yeah, my wife and I, we traveled before we got married, so we got a little of that out of it. But we take our kids. Our kids love traveling, so we just take them with us now.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say the other thing is like just a reminder for folks, like great outcomes, really good work, craft. It's like not easy. It takes a lot of work. Like there is a certain level of endurance and perseverance and like saying it's not good enough and going deeper, taking that extra couple of days, staying up, unfortunately staying up late, especially earlier in your career, like really needing to hammer down on things. There are those moments. You're just balancing those moments between also,
yeah.
little breaks. But I just one reflection is like, man, like some of it is just like we worked hard and hard in a sense that someone was telling us. It's just that to get to some of the things that we're all really proud of, or those moments like, oh my God, we created this thing. A lot of the like aha moments also sometimes came late in the game when you kind of
Mhm.
really are drilling down deep.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask too is what, if any, what part did mentorship and coaching play? And are there any mentors you want to like shout out
Yeah,
across your career?
yeah. Um, I feel like throughout all the different places I've gone to, there is always someone who helped push me a little, gave me chance, risk, like, hey, go try doing this. So like I thank you to all those folks. Um, I think a few folks that come to mind, both friends, Marco, who I mentioned earlier, that I've gotten to work through almost a third of my career. There's so many moments in there that I can't describe, but like learned so much and seeing them push themselves and other teams has kind of given me a lot of inspiration. Folks like Reese Newman, like longtime design leader and executive, he ran the advanced design group or team in Calabasas at Nokia back in the day, and just learning how he built culture and curiosity and openness and kind of this creative environment that really enabled both senior people, but also like people early in the career shine and bring ideas forward was amazing. And the third person that, like, especially in the startup environment, when I was at Tally, where I was a little bit over there for 3 or so years, the CEO, Jason Brown, yeah, he gave me so many shots, so many opportunities. I really saw like what true mentorship and support really is, where in the right way, continuously help me kind of get better and give me the opportunities to keep improving. That I think like today where I am as a more of like I would say in air quotes like as a product leader or a design leader or an executive, I think Jason plays a huge role in helping kind of cultivate and grow that by both like continue to enable me to take that 5% of risk on a regular basis. But then also, I remember some of my first big board presentations, fundraise, all these kind of big moments where like learned a lot. And like, so I think that's the same thing. Like my takeaway from all the folks who got a chance, like now as I have a team and helping other folks grow, just where do I give folks opportunities to do things they haven't done before, or take those 5% risk, and able to be a little bit uncomfortable, but also enables more accelerated growth.
Yeah. Transitioning a little bit, and hopefully those people will hear themselves, and thank you for the shout outs. We talked about a book already. We talked about 5 dysfunctions, but for you, what if you could recommend or wanted to recommend one book or two to people listening, or something else, some other resource, what would you recommend they pick up?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna mention 5 dysfunctions. So it's like I felt at first like it's so funny that you brought it up. It's a little bit of a, I wouldn't say it's like a fable, right? And then so it can be seen a little bit cheesy in some ways, but it's like, I don't know, it's weird. It was weirdly impactful. I read it when I was like in my first executive leadership role. So and then for me it was like, oh wow, like okay, it's just like opened up very basic principles that no one like. I don't know why. It just didn't come up when I was like an IC. Like one is this whole like who's your team is a really
Right.
good question. And thinking about teams, and like there's more than one team often in your relationships, and you have to kind of invest in them differently and equally, and not forget about the other one. And the basic things about like trust and accountability and like conflict, they're like really interesting topics. And so those 5 dysfunctions in the book, those could be applied into so many relationships, one-on-one relationships, group relationships, product teams, executive teams. So I think it's a great book. This is not a different type of advice, not a book, but like what interesting, don't know why I didn't know this earlier in my career, but both when I got more senior at Google and started spending more time with VPs, directors, and then when I crossed over into being a leader at startups, I started to realize that everyone has like someone else helping them, a mentor, a coach, multiple coaches. And it's weird. I didn't realize as you've grown that actually your like circle or the things you're investing in yourself or the other folks that are helping you do better kind of increases. And that was my aha moment. It's like, wait, you have a coach and you have a coach. Oh wow! Like I don't know why it wasn't talked about when I was like younger in my career, and I realized, and that was also prolific for me, having my first like coach and then the second coach, and being able to like take time where you're investing in yourself and both your own self awareness, your own all the like. I realized over time, so much of the stuff is just locked up in your head, your own blockers, and something else outside of you. So that's another thing. It's not a book, leads to books, but like there's a lot of ways to grow, and it's not just doing it all on your own. And sometimes getting those external perspectives goes a long way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I could get through. So even my mentors and like even some of my leaders played coaches, and people across organizations played coaches for me. But I didn't get through a lot of my major blockers until I had a personal coach, right? So like my imposter syndrome, my like worries, like my scarcity mindset, like those kinds of things, right? Because your mentors at work, they can tell you how to be successful or help you be successful and how to think about things within a work context. When you start to think about some of the things that block you at work and in other parts of your life that you maybe don't even realize, like for me, I had to get a coach to help me through that. And it helped me tremendously. So not saying that you have to get one. This your manager might be able to help you through this, but the first thing to get through it is to talk about it and actually
Yeah,
acknowledge it.
absolutely.
Um,
Spot
so
on.
yeah, I 100% agree. Okay, well, we're at time, and Jacob, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to
Yeah,
join us. There's so much I wanted to get into AI, social good, some of the other things we talked about before. So hopefully we'll have you back. Hopefully you'll be up to coming back at some point and talking about some of those deeper subjects sometime soon.
absolutely. Rico, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this. Thanks for letting me go off on some tangents and ramble a little. This was great. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks for taking the time. And everyone, this is another episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today and let's make your future a reality.